Gather close now, my friends. Closer still. Let the fire burn low and the night press in around us. You see, most people think history is written in ink. But I've found the most important tales are written in the things we choose to remember, and the things we wish we could forget. I think the ash and the amber is written in a little of both. The morning after the fire did not bring the sun. It brought a sky the color of a wet slate, and a silence so heavy it felt like stones in the lungs. In Willowmere, the air no longer smelled of honey and rain. It smelled of iron, spent magic, and the cold remains of a war that had only just begun. Lila didn't cry. There was no room for tears in a heart that was being forged into something harder. She knelt before the creature, no, her friend, and reached for his wing. A jagged cut from a blackthorn spear wept golden blood that hissed when it hit the ash. Lila, stay still, Ember. I've got you. I've always got you. The dragon didn't flinch. He let out a low, vibrating hum, a sound like a cat purring inside a cello. As the wool touched his skin, the gold blood soaked through, turning the fabric into a glowing ribbon of light. The bond wasn't just in their minds anymore. It was in their very marrow. They came then, the men and women who had watched Lila grow, who had bought her mother's honey and cheered at her races. But they didn't come with bandages or bread. They stood back, their eyes wide with a primal, ancient fear. To them, she wasn't Lila anymore. She was the girl who had invited the storm into their valley. Marek, the village headman, stepped forward, then said, "The Blackthorn riders are gone, child, but their ghosts will bring the Warlord himself. And worse, the high peaks have seen your fire. The great dragons do not tolerate rogues. Your presence here is a death sentence for every soul in Willowmere." Lila looked up. Her eyes, once a simple nut brown, now held flecks of dancing gold that refused to dim. She saw the fear in Marek's trembling hands, and for the first time she realized that home was a place she could never go back to. No words were needed. Her mother's hands were shaking, but her grip was firm. It was a push and a prayer all at once. "Go," her eyes said. "Go before the world catches you." Lila felt the weight of the satchel, a life reduced to a few pounds of leather and wool. Lila didn't look back. If she looked back, she might turn to salt. She fixed her eyes on the highest peak, where the clouds swirled in angry, white vortices. "They think we are a mistake, Ember. They think the rules of the world are written in stone." High above, a single distant roar echoed through the clouds, a sound of thunder that didn't come from the rain. "Let them come. We'll rewrite the stones together." The border of Willowmere was marked by an old stone bridge, cracked by centuries of frost. When Lila crossed it, she felt a phantom tether snap. Behind her lay the scent of baking bread and the sound of the village well. Before her lay the silver pines, a forest where the sun struggled to reach the mossy floor. Ember was restless on her shoulder, his tail lashed like a nervous whip, his golden eyes darting toward the canopy. He wasn't just seeing the trees, he was sensing the ancient magic woven into the roots. To a dragon, the world isn't just wood and stone. It is a map of heat and humming energy, and right now the map was whispering a warning. The cold of the high peaks is a living thing. It bites at the fingers and numbs the resolve. Lila struck the flint again. Spark. Nothing. Spark. Nothing. She let out a breath that turned to a cloud of ice in the air. Then a low rumble started in Ember's chest. He leaned over the small pile of twigs and opened his maw. There was no roar, just a soft whoosh, a focused needle of white-hot plasma. The wood didn't just catch fire. It turned into a miniature sun, casting long, dancing shadows against the bark. Lila: "Thanks, little one. I suppose I don't need flint as long as I have you, do I?" She broke a piece of the dark bread her mother had given her. It tasted of home, nutty and salt-tinged, and for a moment, the lump in her throat was harder to swallow than the food. That night, Lila didn't sleep. She drifted into the merging. This is the secret the old scrolls never mentioned. When a dragon chooses a human, their souls begin to leak into one another. She felt Ember's dreams. She felt the itch of scales growing, the phantom ache of wings that weren't yet strong enough to catch the wind. She saw the world as a predator sees it, vibrant, pulsing, and full of hidden paths. But deep in the dream, a cold shadow emerged. A great blue shape soaring through the upper atmosphere, its mind a sharp, icy blade searching for a glitch in the world's order. Silence is the loudest sound in the wilderness. Lila woke with her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Ember was already standing, his hackles raised, a low hiss escaping his teeth. High above, the moon was blotted out. For 3 long seconds, a shadow the size of a village square swept over the clearing. The air temperature dropped 40 degrees in an instant. Frost crystallized on Lila's eyelashes. This wasn't a storm of nature. This was Valthrax the Arbiter, the blue dragon of the north, sent by the High Council to erase the mistake that was Lila and Ember.
"Run!"
Lila whispered, though her legs felt like lead. They dived into the thickest part of the gorge, where the rocks leaned together like praying giants. Above them, the sky screamed. Valthrax had found them. A bolt of blue lightning, dragon fire in its coldest, purest form, shattered a pine tree 10 feet behind them. The explosion threw Lila forward, her face hitting the frozen dirt. She reached the end of the path. A wall of sheer granite rose before her, and behind her, the sound of a mountain landing. Thump! The earth groaned. Thump! The trees snapped. Lila turned, clutching her father's knife, a toothpick against a titan. Out of the swirling snow emerged a head the size of a carriage, covered in scales that looked like shards of sapphires. Valthrax didn't roar. He simply looked at them, and his gaze was as cold as the stars. To look upon a great dragon is to realize how small a human life truly is. Valthrax did not just stand. He occupied the very air. Every breath he took smelled of ozone and ancient ice. His scales were not just blue. They were 1,000 shades of sapphire, cobalt, and midnight, each one as thick as a warrior's shield. Lila felt the weight of his gaze. It wasn't just sight, it was a physical pressure, a mental probe that reached into her memories, sifting through her childhood in Willowmere like a man looking through a box of old trinkets. She felt her knees tremble, not from cowardice, but because her body recognized it was standing before a force of nature. Lila heard Valthrax. "You are a flickering candle, little spark. Do you know what you carry? You carry a breach in the foundation of the world. The compact was written in the blood of the First Age. Men belong to the earth, and dragons belong to the sky. There is no middle ground. The voice felt like heavy bass vibrating in Lila's teeth. It was cold, indifferent, and terrifyingly logical. To Valthrax, Lila wasn't an enemy. She was a smudge on a clean page that needed to be erased. The middle ground is standing right here, Great One. You talk of laws and foundations, but Ember didn't choose a law. He chose me. He sang to me when he was nothing but a stone in the mud. If your world is so fragile that a girl and a hatchling can break it, then maybe it's already broken. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. No human had spoken to an arbiter with such casual ferocity in 1,000 years. Valthrax tilted his massive head, a gesture of predatory curiosity. If the bond is real, it will survive the frost. If it is a fluke of magic, you will become part of the mountain. This is the only law that matters now, the trial of the breath. Lila knew what was coming. She had heard the legends of the Blue Death, a frost so absolute it could freeze a man's blood before he could scream. She didn't turn to run. There was nowhere to go. Instead, she sat on the frozen ground and pulled Ember into her lap. The world turned white. The roar of the frostfire was like 1,000 glass windows shattering at once. Outside the golden sphere, the stones of the gorge cracked and turned to powder from the sudden cold. Inside, the air was warm, smelling of summer grass and wood smoke. But the shield was flickering. Lila could feel Ember's heart. It was beating too fast, like a bird trapped in a cage. He was pouring every ounce of his infant magic into the barrier, but Valthrax was a tide, and Ember was a single sandcastle. She didn't think. She acted on a primal instinct she hadn't known she possessed. She opened the door in her mind, the one that had been clicking shut since she was 9 years old. Lila, take it. Take my warmth. Take my breath. We are one. She felt a surge of heat leave her body, a literal transfer of life force. The golden shield didn't just stabilize, it turned solid. It became a dome of physical sunlight. The frostfire hit the barrier and splashed harmlessly to the sides like water against a diamond. Lila slumped, her skin deathly pale, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Ember collapsed beside her, his wings twitching, his scales smoking. They were alive, but they had given everything to remain so. Valthrax looked down at the charred golden circle. For the first time, the coldness in his eyes was replaced by something else. Hesitation. He had seen the girl who was dragon, and for the first time in an eternity, the arbiter was unsure of the law. Every miracle has a price, and the price for defying a great dragon is paid in the currency of the soul. Lila felt a hollowness in her chest, as if the fire she had shared with Ember had burned away the girl she used to be. The heat had left her. She was now as cold as the ice surrounding them, yet her heart beat with a slow, heavy rhythm that wasn't entirely her own. She looked at her hands. They were trembling, but not from the frost. They were humming. She could feel the tectonic plates shifting deep beneath the mountains. She could feel the sap freezing in the distant pines. Her senses had expanded far beyond the limits of a human mind, and the weight of it was crushing. Valthrax did not strike again. To a being who had lived through 3 ages of the world, what he had just witnessed was more than a fluke. It was a heresy of the highest order. A human should have been charred bone and ash. A hatchling should have been a frozen statue. You have tasted the fire of the soul, little spark. You have fed the dragon with your life, and he has fed you with his essence. You are no longer a guest in this world. You are a participant in its making. The link was now a bridge that would never close. When Lila felt the ache in her lungs, Ember coughed. When Ember's wounded wing twitched in pain, Lila's own shoulder flared with a sharp, phantom sting. They were a knot, a rare and dangerous occurrence in the ancient lore, where two spirits become so entangled that one cannot die without the other. It was the very thing the Dragon Council feared most. A human with the power of a dragon was a weapon. A dragon with the empathy of a human was a revolution. In that moment of weakness, a vision flooded Lila's mind, not from Ember, but from Valthrax. It was a map and a mandate. The Star Peak, the place where the first dragons were hatched under the light of a falling star. If you truly believe this bond is more than a thief's trick, you must bring it to the High Consistory. You have 3 moons to reach the Star Peak. If you survive the journey, you will be judged by the 7. If you fail, the mountains themselves will bury your memory. He left as quickly as he had arrived, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than his presence. The gorge was a graveyard of ice, beautiful and deadly. Lila sat alone in the center of the wreckage, clutching a dragon that was now a part of her soul. 3 moons, Ember. We have 3 moons to learn how to live with this, or how to die for it. Ember chirped, a weak, tired sound, and tucked his head under her chin. The journey to the Star Peak was 1,000 miles of vertical stone and hidden dangers, but for the first time, Lila didn't feel like a victim of fate. She felt like its architect. The dawn did not come with a fanfare. It came with a pale, watery light that turned the ice to glass and the glass to water. Lila stood on legs that felt as though they belonged to someone else, heavier, stronger, yet strangely distant. She watched the meltwater rush past her boots, carrying away the ash of her old life. She realized then that the truce Valthrax had offered was not an act of mercy, it was a test. The great dragons did not care if she lived or died. They cared only if the bond was strong enough to endure the world's gravity. To them, she was a seedling planted in a hurricane. The world was no longer quiet. Even without Valthrax there, Lila could hear the song of the stone, the deep, tectonic groan of the mountains. She could feel the pulse of the earth beneath her feet as clearly as her own heartbeat. Is this what you feel all the time, Ember? Is the world always this loud, this bright? Ember didn't answer in words, but a wave of reassurance washed over her, a feeling of rightness. To the dragon, this wasn't a burden. It was a homecoming. And slowly, painfully, Lila began to realize that she wasn't just Lila anymore. She was the bridge between the dirt and the sky. She thought of her mother's hands. She thought of the smell of the honey jars and the way the morning mist used to sit in the barley fields. A part of her wanted to run back, to hide under the floorboards and pretend the egg had never sung. But the gold in her blood wouldn't allow it. The moment she had shared her life force with Ember, the simple girl had died. In her place was something ancient and new. She reached into her bag, pulled out a crust of bread, and shared it with the hatchling. They ate in silence, 2 outcasts at the edge of the world. She turned her back on the smoke of the valley. Every step upward was a step away from safety, and every inch of elevation made the air thinner and the shadows longer. The star peak sat on the horizon like a jagged tooth, beautiful and indifferent to her struggle. 3 moons, she whispered to the wind. 3 moons to become what we are meant to be. My friends, we often think that legends are born in the moment of a great battle, but they aren't. They are born in the quiet moments after the fire, when a person decides to keep walking even when the path is gone. Lila and Ember were no longer a girl and a pet. They were a singular heart beating in 2 bodies, carrying a flame that had been cold for 1,000 years. The Warlord Garrick Blackthorn was gathering his iron. The Council of 7 was watching from the heights. The world was preparing to break them. But the world forgot one thing. A bond that breaks the rules doesn't care about the rules of the world. Would you like to hear of the first moon? When the hunters of Blackthorn found their trail in the high pass. When Ember learned that a dragon's greatest weapon isn't his fire, but his shadow. The story is still growing, and the climb has only just begun. What will happen next? Time will only tell.